The Birmingham Civil Rights Institute is charged with the idea of taking the lessons from the past and transferring them to our future.
As stewards of history in the Birmingham movement, the BCRI houses incredible collections that show and document where the community has come from and how the Birmingham movement both came to be and was so successful.
For more than 25 years, the Institute has educated people about what happened here in the 60s, not just in Birmingham, but across our country. Civil rights and equality challenged today just as they were many decades ago. We are here to enlighten each generation about civil and human rights by exploring our common past and working together in the present to build a better future.
Through many educational offerings, we teach the idea that the changes in Birmingham, Alabama were not just because of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King and Reverend Fred Shuttlesworth and Reverend Ralph Abernathy. A lot of these changes took place because of the youth in this city. And due to that, we have a mission to share with the youth of today what youth in their generations in the past have done. Through our Legacy Youth Leadership Program, we bring high school students from all over the Jefferson County area here to study this narrative and to serve as docents and ambassadors to the Civil Rights Institute. We have BCAP, which is the Birmingham Cultural Alliance Project, where we visit middle school students and we take them through this history and through this narrative so that they can prepare to understand their role in society. We have outreach programs that visit many schools and institutions to highlight the story of accomplishment, the story of overcoming, the story of a power and the movement that people in Birmingham were able to bring to bear to change not only the city, but the state, the nation, and the world.
By making it accessible to researchers and local students from middle, high, and university students, they're able to come in and see where we've been so that they can go and be better stewards of Birmingham and our present and then our future.
Thank you for joining us for this engaging virtual conversation series. We invite you to help us continue the work for civil rights through racial justice by becoming a member or donating to our work. You can find us on our social media platforms to stay connected with us. Thanks again for your support.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm Rosalind Houston, a proud member of the Birmingham Civil Rights Institute and the Board of Directors. BCRI's mission is to enlighten each generation about civil and human rights by exploring our common past and working together in the present to build a better future. We stand in the heart of the Civil Rights District here in Birmingham, Alabama, as the cornerstone of the civil rights story and a living memorial with an ongoing mission. Today, I also represent BBVA USA, where I lead our nearly 11,000 member workforce as Senior Executive Vice President and Chief Talent and Culture Executive. We are the proud sponsor of the BCRI Virtual Conversation Series, and we welcome you to today's session, Leading Change. We will hear directly from the revered global leader, pastor, philanthropist, author, filmmaker, and mastermind influencer, Bishop T.D. Jakes, as he moderates a historical discussion with this panel of honorable Black mayors from cities in the Deep South with a rich, long history of unrelenting pursuit of racial equity and social justice for all citizens across the United States and the world. As a vocal champion for diversity, equity, and inclusion, BBVA understands the importance of healthy dialogue and the hard work that is required to bring about change and to create opportunities for all. It is why earlier this year, BBVA was one of the first U.S. banks to call for a national dialogue about systemic racism following the killings of George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, and Breonna Taylor. We are humbled to play a role in bringing us all together today, and we appreciate your participation. Thank you so much for joining us. And now, please join me in welcoming our moderator, Bishop T.D. Jakes.
Good afternoon. I want to welcome you to what I believe is going to be a riveting opportunity to hear perspectives from several of our leading mayors throughout the United States. There's certainly going to be some synergism in their approach and philosophies, but there's also some vast uniqueness that's going to be shared today. On the heels of the tempestuous election that we have just come through and the pandemic that we are yet dealing with, the economic disparities that we face every day, this should be a no-miss opportunity to hear from some of the giants that I call on the front lines, really dealing with the day-to-day issues that affect our lives, our cities, our well-being, our homes, our economic standing, and so many things that really, really, really will interest you in such a significant way that you cannot afford to miss this opportunity or to tag other people and to invite them to have this experience. We're grateful for the Birmingham Civil Rights Institute that has afforded us this opportunity to hear from each of these mayors today. I want them to, in short, introduce themselves and just speak a moment on the heels of the election, how that affects your strategy for your cities and what you hope to do. And as is our custom, ladies should always go first. So I'm going to yield the floor to Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms to lead the discussion.
Well, thank you so much, Bishop. It is truly an honor to join you again and also to see my friends and my fellow mayors here. And I am so appreciative of the honor of being able to join this event today. I am happy. Someone came into my home a couple of days ago who had been doing some work around my home, and they've seen me several days a week for the past several months. And he looked at me a couple of days after the election. He said, "You look happy." So I don't think that I recognize how much I was carrying on my shoulders related to this election and where we are as a country, but there certainly is a sense of relief. And I know that my brother mayors join me in saying that it has been more than the notion being mayor during this time, but being mayor is a challenging job in and of itself. But you add on top of that having to go to battle almost daily with the White House, and for many of us with our governors on any number of issues related to COVID and social unrest in our city. So I am optimistic and I have a hope for this country and really just a restoration of belief in the goodness of who we are. I know this was a close election, but the majority has prevailed, and it's my prayer that the goodwill and the reconciliation that we're already seeing take place will continue.
Thank you very much. Thank you very, very, very much. Mayor Woodfin, would you jump in?
Yes, sir, Bishop, and thank you for hosting us today, as well as my fellow mayors who I genuinely consider friends, who have poured into me and given me guidance, especially in 2020 with the coronavirus here. I will tell you that I agree with Mayor Bottoms. I am feeling extremely hopeful for two fronts. Well, actually three. The first front is this. We now will have a president that mayors can work with across the nation. You know, the current administration, or the outgoing administration, has been at war, an intentional war, with urban cores across America. And that's been hard to be a mayor, related to the coronavirus, related to the economic crisis, intentionally leaving us out of allowing us to shore up our budget shortfalls with CARES funding. But all other organizations and entities were able to receive a bailout with limited strings attached. And so just to have someone in the White House starting in January that wants to work with mayors across the nation is extremely refreshing and hopeful. The other thing is, of course, the coronavirus. As mayors, we've had to literally be on the front line of engaging how to protect our citizens and not getting the necessary help we needed from our governors or our president. And I mean, Mayor Bottoms is an example. Her own governor sued her, which is crazy when you think about it. So it's great, again, to have someone at the White House that will make engaging and dealing with the coronavirus and putting people's lives as a top priority, the priority to be. So those are the reasons why I am hopeful.
Thank you very much. Mayor Lumumba.
Well, once again, greetings, Bishop. It is an honor to have the opportunity to be a part of this panel and to have you moderate it. I have to echo the sentiments of my colleagues and my friends, people who are actually trusted advisors. These are individuals that I certainly call on in moments of question or need, and they never fail to respond to that call. And so I'm grateful for their leadership and their friendship. I would echo the sentiments that we are excited and grateful that at least we have a willing partner in our national leadership. That should be a baseline that we should all expect, but that has not been our reality. But I would also quote the words of Professor Ruha Benjamin, who says that we must not only dismantle the world we don't want to live in, we must be the most active participants in building the one we do want to live in. And so it is incumbent upon us as mayors, people who have been tasked with leading our cities. It is important that the people themselves, the people who are engaged in the voting process that has led to new leadership on the national level, remain engaged, remain, a part of the process that really, looks at how we build this society beyond contradiction. COVID-19 has come forth and really exposed in a heightened way the inequities that lie in our society. And so we have to be active participants in building what we refer to as a dignity economy in Jackson. We see communities that go through cycles of humiliation, where we see high poverty, poor performing schools, failing infrastructure, a lack of economic development and opportunities within communities. And so we have to build economies which focus on the inherent dignity of every single person. One of the challenges and one of the problems with economists is that economists don't study people. And so we have to build a world that looks at sustainable development goals, and to have the leadership on the national level that we believe is more receptive to building that is certainly encouraging, and we look forward to taking advantage of that opportunity.
Thank you very much. Mayor Scott.
You're muted, my man.
There you go.
Well, thank you so much, Mayor. Bishop Jakes, I really just want to take this opportunity to say thank you for bringing us all together. It's truly an honor to be with these very great leaders here in our nation's cities. And from that standpoint, as we are now entering a new chapter in these United States, I am extremely hopeful that we are turning our heads towards uniting our nation, healing our nation, and transforming our nation. And so as a mayor of a capital city, when we're focused on those three pillars of uniting and healing and transforming, I'm excited that we'll see equitable economics, that we'll see a greater focus on equity in our justice system, and a greater focus on equity in education. And so from those standpoints, we truly are entering a new day, and that new day will lead us to an even brighter day. So thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank all of you for being here with us today. It occurs to me that in all of my lifetime, I don't think that I have ever seen an election that was so acrimonious. They often are combative and they often are robust. And I think what makes our country great is that we are able to have the kind of public discourse and debate about the direction of our country. But this one stands on a level that is very unique from anything we have ever seen before. And though all four of you have talked about how elated you are, and perhaps your constituencies are elated about the changes that have been made, there are still some people out there who are very, very upset and disappointed what is your goal and way in which you strategically think about unifying your cities and bringing about at least enough harmony that you can move your city forward?
So I don't know if you want me to start again, Bishop, but I'll tell you, on the Wednesday morning after the election, I felt like someone had punched me in the gut. I was blown away at the thought that this election was this close, and it hurt. And I remember thinking, this should be the happiest day of the entire year. This is what we've been working towards. But instead, I was more depressed than I've been the entire election season. And I've been very active with the Biden campaign for quite some time, and really took pride in the fact that I didn't get too high and I didn't get too low. But on Wednesday morning, I was low. I was very low. And then it made me just stop and think about the fact that nearly half the country voted for Donald Trump, which to me seemed a no-brainer, that he shouldn't be president again. But I had to really open up my mind and my thinking to, well, maybe it's not as black and white as I think that it is. So while I have this entire list of things that I think are wrong with him, clearly there are millions of people in this country who find some things that are right. And for me, it really was challenging my thinking on what is it perhaps that they are seeing that's right about him, that perhaps maybe some things are right, but I'm just completely missing. And, you know, I'm a work in progress on that, because I continue to get blocked by those hateful things that we all see. But clearly, there's some people who aren't racist, who find value in the way he's handled economics in this country, and the list can go on. So I'm continuing to look for those things that we can find common ground on, because I know if I don't enlarge my thinking as mayor, then I know we're going to continue to be divided. And when you are elected mayor of a city, you've got to represent everyone.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Go ahead, Pastor. Pastor. I just made you a pastor. Mayor Woodfin.
Very quickly, Bishop. I think just to expound upon what Mayor Bottom said, I think two things exist. Most presidential elections fall on the fault line of hope and fear. And I think fear has been exposed way too much over the last 4 years, and it's time to swing that pendulum back to hope. And swinging that pendulum back to hope, you know, this whole notion of uniting people, there's one thing to talk about. How do we address the coronavirus? It has bothered me on a daily basis, especially March, April, and May, at the height of the highest of the cases, that somehow at every level, federal, state, and local, that a global health pandemic was politicized. Facial covers aren't a political statement. Hospitals not being overrun is not a political statement. This country needs to unite and as under one leader to tell us the direction we need to go to fight and address this global health pandemic. 240,000 plus people have died. The city of that's literally the city of Birmingham's entire population. So that's a considerable amount of people. If there is one thing that can bring Americans together, it is having a leader as we rev up and the coronavirus hits a season where the flu season is also high. If we're really focused on saving lives and preventing more people from dying, we really need to unite around addressing a global health pandemic, listening to the experts, listening to those who are in the medical field, not making it political, and driving one single message as Americans, how to solve this crisis to prevent people from dying.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bishop, I would say also, as Mayor Woodfin has eloquently shared, there has to be an earnest and strategic focus on getting through our global pandemic. But in that same vein, in a parallel, we also are in an economic recession, and we have to recover. But not only recover, we have to grow. And so we firmly believe that President-elect Biden and Madam Vice President-elect Harris have to focus on our economic recovery. But in the same vein, understanding that we are all experiencing a disrupted season. But two things that really come out of a disrupted season is value and innovation. And so as the value is being extracted in the new innovation, we have to ensure that everyone is at the table and participating in a part of the economic process so we all grow together. And that's something that we have to ensure that the new president and Madam Vice President are focused on, because that will hit all levels in our nation's cities.
Let's talk about that just for a moment. And I want to open it up where anybody can just jump in. We don't have to take turns. On one hand, we have a pandemic of epic proportions that we have not seen since before the Depression, perhaps 100 years. A pandemic that has spiked again, entered into all of our communities, all of our cities, but particularly and disproportionately affected people of color, Black and brown people, people who don't have access to health care or previous existing health maladies, people, baby boomers in my age bracket and so forth and so on, are on the hit list of this pandemic that has come in. And yet, strategically, as you have so eloquently shared, Mayor Scott, there is an emphasis and a need for economic empowerment and sustainability of our cities and communities. And that need is, to me, tied together with the pandemic. You cannot ignore the pandemic and fix the economy, because the economy is inextricably connected to the pandemic. And yet in some ways, the economy does as much damage, not only to our infrastructures, our financial capacities, but also our mental health and well-being, being isolated, being sheltered at home, living with the fear and the uncertainty of who's next, seeing disproportionate amounts of deaths. So as this administration moves into position, and as you are in position, you're juggling between a knife and a gun. Which how do you take one over the other, and what is your strategy to deal with the pandemic without destroying the economic structure in your cities and in our country?
If I could jump in here, I think that it's important. I think that you properly position the question by acknowledging that it's ultimately two sides of the same coin. When we look at the economic conditions, coronavirus has not come here in order to discriminate against Black and brown communities. It has exposed where we are already missing the mark, where there are already great inequities. The reason that we see a disproportionate amount of health disparities within Black and brown communities is because of the economic conditions in which the people live each and every day. The fact that they can't afford, that their version of healthcare is to just try not to get sick, right? That they don't have the access and the ability to regularly and routinely have doctor's visits that can maintain their blood pressure and all of those things that have been exposed and taken advantage of by the pandemic. And so, I think that, in many ways, and I think this is an appropriate analogy to make, in many ways, we have to look at this thing in the very same way that Martin Luther King began to look at the issues that communities were facing not long before he died, where he had a conversation with Harry Belafonte, and he said, listen, Harry, I believe we're going to win this integration struggle, this struggle against Jim Crow, against America's apartheid. But he said, I'm beginning to fear that we may be integrating into a burning house. He said, I see a system that abuses labor and abuses working people. If people can't be fed, if they can't have access to the resources that they need, then it's senseless to just walk Birmingham or Mississippi roads together. That we have to talk about how we share goods, resources, and power. And so we're still confronting those same challenges today when we see people with a lack of access to healthcare, with a lack of access to secured resources. We have to realize that many of the decisions that we're forced to make as mayors, whether we're instituting social distancing requirements or, shutting down certain sectors of our economy, that there is a certain sense of privilege within that. What does social distancing really look like if you live in a housing unit where your backyard is everyone's backyard? What is our ability to protect people when we're shutting sectors of our economy, but there's a large portion of our population that work the jobs that we are saying are the necessary jobs that we have to keep going, that they're critical workers. Those people by and large, work in the service industry, and they are disproportionately being exposed to the virus. And so it really is a balance each and every day in how we manage this.
Absolutely. Other comments on this?
Yeah, just quickly, Bishop. I mean, it's Mayor Lumumba said it perfectly. But short term, as mayors, we have to be in our roles to say, if federal CARES money wasn't going to come, or if we didn't know how long it was going to take before it got here, then we realized that our small business owners, particularly our Black-owned business owners, had about a 14, max 21-day cash on hand. And we had to form public-private partnerships to offset their losses in order for them to survive. But then that the next step was the hourly worker who was either furloughed or laid off. So again, we had to, the four of us had to get creative at a local level to solve for creative ways to bring opportunity for these hourly employees who were laid off. I think long term, none of us took our economic development hats off as mayors. We have to continue to recruit industry. We have to continue to protect the businesses that exist in our cities to expand them for opportunity to let our residents know that one of the most successful ways of improving the quality of life for all of our cities is for our residents to be gainfully employed. And although in our left hand, there have been a tremendous amount of people laid off in all of our cities, Birmingham alone, 17,000+ post-March, and that is early numbers. I think that number has gone up. We have to focus on not just saving lives, but saving people's jobs as well, or creating opportunities for people to be gainfully employed post the coronavirus.
When you start talking about saving people's lives, and we look at Congress trying to pass legislation that would afford us to have some economic relief, who gets the relief when so many different areas are hemorrhaging simultaneously? When you look at the fact that so many of our community are small business owners, entrepreneurs, or what have you, and then many of them are employees, if we save the businesses, most of them do not have many employees in them. Do you think that the money should go directly to subsidize the sustainability of the individual citizen, or more aptly applied to the businesses themselves in the hope that there will be a trickle down from the business owner to hiring people and getting back up and running again? Is it a either or is it a both?
Bishop, I definitely say it's both, Bishop. Being a former banker myself and engaged with a number of small businesses, I think one of the things that Mayor Lumumba shared, as well as Mayor Woodfin and Mayor Bottoms, is this pandemic identified healthcare disparities, but more importantly, it also identified the acute awareness of financial disparities with our small businesses, particularly Black and brown businesses. And so one of the things that we figured out is, number one, not only was there a low cash on hand, many times the businesses that we're referring to do not have a bank or a banker. So they were left out of the PPP process, payment protection loan process. And so that was the reason why many members of Congress advocated for the CARES Act funding to go directly for small business emergency assistance. And so even in that process, one of the things that's highlighted is that we have to focus on our minority businesses and help them transition from not only being in business, but to have a spirit of operational and financial excellence so they can obtain equity funding and then have greater access to capital. And from a standpoint from the employee, we have to have targeted community development in low income areas. And so it's not an either or, it's both and, as we move forward in this parallel fashion of fighting COVID-19, but also fighting not only to recover from the economy, but instill that we have a sustainable economy that's never really been as intentional as it needs to be from an equity standpoint.
Mayor Bottoms?
Yeah, you know, I'll tell you, Bishop, this has been one of the most creative opportunities I've had during my tenure as mayor, because we've had to think outside the box. And what I've said the past several months, this is leadership for me has been just as much about following than it has been about leading. So I'll give you an example with our ATL Strong push that was directly lifted from Mayor Woodfin's Birmingham Strong. And we really began to think through what will our communities need? What will our small businesses need? What will our families need? And how can we stand in the gap? And my charge to our team at the front end of COVID was God bless the child who's got his own, because I didn't think that the federal government was going to come through. And I, in my wildest dreams, didn't think that I would be at odds with the state. But just, again, sheer creativity, the Strength and Beauty Fund, that was just my thinking about my mother owning a hair salon and what having to close would have done to her. So we were able to give out $1,000 grants to people, barbers and cosmetologists. We had a CreateTL fund for people in the gig industry. We had a small business fund. And the list goes on. We suspended towing and booting in the right of way because restaurants were going to take out only. We suspended water bill payments because we knew that, you know, people would have to really think about how they were spending their money. But the fortunate part for us, and this is representative of so many families and businesses across this country, we were able to step in and do a lot of these things because we were okay going into the pandemic financially. We were able to give our sanitation workers, our public safety workers, $500 a month in hazard pay. But then on top of that, the CARES Act funding kicked in, which we got $88 million directly into the city of Atlanta. Our airport got another $330 million, I believe. I would venture to say that I'm probably the only mayor here whose city directly got CARES Act funding. So those who were already having challenges, COVID made it even more challenging. And those of us who were in a little better position have been able to ride this out in a stronger position. And therein lies this challenge that we're having across this country. And so it's allowed us to be creative. But it certainly, you get to be a whole lot more creative when you have money in the bank and you can survive the storm.
I would just add that necessity has always been the mother of invention. And so our creativity has been forced by the circumstance. And we do, you know, just as Mayor Bottoms spoke about how she borrowed an idea from Birmingham, I stole an idea from my good friend Mayor Bottoms as it related to the election and trying to let city employees off so that they would be able to vote because we knew just how critical it was. But, you know, in this time, we've had to pull our resources together, working with external partners. I know that many of my friends on this call work with groups like Hope Community Credit Union, that help process a number of loans for small businesses. And in our communities, the small business sector is the lifeblood of our economy. It is the engine of our economy. And so it is a twofold proposition, Bishop, where we need to support those businesses that help keep our economy going. But we also know that we've been waiting for trickle-down economics to work for our communities for quite some time. Many of the people who have suffered through COVID on a day-to-day basis are what we call the working poor, that don't have the resources that they need, have received criticism based on the stimulus checks that they have received and the unemployment assistance that they have received at this hour. And there has been suggestion that they didn't want to return to work. The problem is not that they were choosing to take the stimulus checks or the unemployment. The problem is that they don't work jobs that pay them sufficient wages on a day-to-day basis in the first place. And so we need to take this not only as a moment where we use our creativity, but a moment to learn how we are failing each and every day as a nation, and recognize that there has to be a basic understanding of the economic support that people deserve within their communities.
Anyone else want to jump in? Because I got someplace I really want to go. When you look at every day, you are the people that make decisions, and whether they are your decisions, you are the ones that are held accountable to other people's decisions. The buck often stops with you in a city, whether it was your choice or decision or not, depending on how your individual municipal governments are set up and structured. And yet today we are facing a problem that we cannot make a decision about. When you look at COVID-19, we don't get to make the decisions. There has been demonizing of shutting down. various areas, and you have to be very careful. We've already talked about the economics of shutting down, sheltering in place. People don't have places to go. They shelter in place, and many times they're sheltering in dangerous places and what have you. And yet we cannot close our eyes to the fact that the numbers are escalating beyond what they did in April and in May. They're going up astronomically, particularly in certain areas. So when you're dealing with something where you cannot make those decisions about where the pandemic is going and you can't control it, it's almost making the decision, you're reacting to it. What are you planning on putting in place while we wait on this silver bullet to come forward that's going to perhaps end this plight, this nightmare? It's just, to me, it's an absolute nightmare that we're all dealing with.
I think the biggest thing for any of us is to continue to talk to our local health officials. They're on the front line from a local standpoint and can not only share with us our numbers in our local areas, but what we should be doing, and equally important, what we should be co-communicating to our residents. And so what I found from the beginning of this coronavirus pandemic, as early as March, is that I needed to communicate to our residents frequently in all forms and channels, not just to TV news, but Black radio. I needed to be on social media. I needed to be in text form. We have to continue to communicate with our residents. The coronavirus is not going away, and even though there is fatigue of sheltering in place, there's fatigue of not being able to just go to a football game when you feel like it. That the end of the fourth quarter of this year and the first quarter of 2021 will be the most challenging, and we can't afford to be selfish as residents or as humans. That if and when we walk out of our home, we have to continue to wear facial covers. We need to continue to not shake hands. If a person doesn't live in your household, don't hug that person. Continue to be 6 feet away. Continue to carry hand sanitizer. Continue to wash your hands. I think all of us have become records on repeat, and we need to re-emphasize on a daily basis to our residents your personal behavior when you walk outside of your home is extremely important for what you bring back into your home, especially if you have a significant other and or children and or a parent or grandparent that lives with you. So the front line is over communicating.
Dr. Fauci has suggested that we are getting much closer up on a vaccination than we've ever been before, with a 90% efficacy. It's the promise that's being alleged to us. The understanding is it's going to roll out to first responders first and then down based on needs until it reaches the whole community. However, people of color have had a bad history with magic cures and drugs and that sort of thing. There are many, many people of color who still won't take a flu shot. What do you think as leaders today concerning this pandemic and the likelihood of a vaccination that is in fact workable? How are you going to handle that, and how do you broach that conversation and build that confidence, or are you skeptical yourselves?
Choco, I know you got a lot of thoughts on this one, brother.
Well, first and foremost, I certainly understand the history of the skepticism of our people. Having graduated from Tuskegee University, where we, now study bioethics and the importance to focus on the fact that research has to have a baseline of efficacy. I think that it is important that not only we fully understand the research and the effectiveness of the vaccine, but it's also important that we stand in the gap and fight for our communities to receive it. There is a certain level of credible or a need for credible messengers that communicate within our community so that they understand the benefits of the vaccine if it is in fact beneficial to them. But also making certain that it is distributed in the way that gets to the people that need it most. We've seen that challenge. Every mayor on this call right now has dealt with that as it pertains to testing. We had insufficient testing. The lack of a national strategy required that we stood in the gap, that we have conversations with private distributors of tests and manufacture a way that we provide clinical ability to administer tests as cities, and that was never imagined for us to do that. I would imagine that well, we're hopeful with the new leadership of the president, the president-elect, that there will be a national strategy that will better help or assist the administration of the drug. But if not, it will require that mayors who are on the grassroots level, that we get creative and we create the path forward and how we will distribute that.
Messaging is going to be critical, and unfortunately, we have not had consistent messaging about any aspect of this health pandemic that we've been dealing with. It's very difficult to control messaging in a social media environment where people are subject to all types of erroneous ideas and philosophies and strategies and so forth. How do we build the kind of messaging that the community trusts? And I'm open to Mayor Scott, anybody just jump right in. How do we build that trust in a skeptical society that has been trained to be skeptical, and in a society where we are not the only voice that they're listening to?
Well, we're in the midst of a war, and a war dealing with this pandemic and our economy. And as you shared, we as leaders have to demonstrate our integrity and report all of the facts, whether we like the facts or not like the facts. And so as we create this battle rhythm, we have to be very consistent with our communication with our residents to help them understand everything about this current process, whether it's with the vaccine, whether we have to evolve our guidelines to operate within the CDC guidelines, as well as our own Department of Health guidelines to get through this process. And so it's going to take constant and consistent communication, but at the end of the day, it has to be reported with true facts. And that's how we build trust. And that consistency helps ease everyone's angst in the midst of this crisis.
This might be a result of me being clergy, but I just want to jump in and say, what role does faith leaders play in this whole community narrative? What do you need from us as mayors in your city? How can we become engaged with you outside of campaigns? And what do you see the role of faith-based entities in terms of community development?
At the risk of talking too much, I really do appreciate you bringing that point up, Bishop, because we have seen that as a very effective measure of how we communicate here in Jackson. We have actually relied on our faith-based institutions and leaders to support much of the communication that has been necessary during COVID, not only in terms of health concerns, but the mental health, not only the physical health, but the mental health concerns. We actually have stood up a mental health warm line, realizing that people who are facing eviction, people who are facing, seeing, increased loss of life in our city, people who are facing a number of ailments at this time are in need of mental health support. And so we have leaned on our faith-based institutions and leaders to be the credible messengers within our communities, understanding that very infrequently do people within our community go to psychologists. Do they go to those people who are professionally trained to help coach them or be the bridge that connects them to people who are trained in that way, so that they can get the support that they need? And so it takes all of us. It takes all of us. We're seeing, a number of issues associated with this virus within our communities. It's not just the fact that people are contracting COVID-19. It's people that are suffering from increased violence within our communities, domestic violence. And so we need to have an all hands on deck approach to this virus and the support systems that have to be created for it.
I want to move now and talk. There's so much I want to talk to you all about. I could keep you here all day because you're such a resource to our community. And thank you for sharing your insights to us. We have just gone through some of the most horrific images that we've seen since Emmett Till, in terms of George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, these sorts of things, which has shined a bright light on the criminal justice system. That has become politicized too. Either you are for the blue or you're for Black Lives Matter. when in fact you have a responsibility. We all have a responsibility. We need the police. When I dial 911, I want somebody to come. I want somebody to answer if somebody's breaking in my house. And there are many, many great police officers out there, black, brown, and white, that we appreciate. We just, you opened up our church to do a funeral for one today. Having said that, there are still elements on the police force that have exhibited the kind of horrific behavior that has made the community skeptical. Long term, when you look at the police officers, the power of their unions, and the issue of qualified immunity, how do we move the narrative further to create an environment not only that creates trust? I'm not talking about going to play basketball with the police officers. We've done all of that. We sung Kumbaya. I'm talking about breaking down the system that exists, that when a police officer goes rogue, we are limited in our options to be able to handle them in a way that satisfies the grieving family and the enraged community.
This is probably
Bottom, you want to go first on that? I know you probably can here.
Yeah, this is one of the biggest challenges we've had across Atlanta, and I'm sure across the country. And it it's reminiscent of when I'm watching my 4 kids, when they're tired and they are fatigued, they turn on each other and they seek to destroy each other. And that's how I look at where we are with our communities right now. We've got a huge spike in crime in Atlanta, and a lot of it are community members fighting amongst each other. But also we're navigating this criminal justice social reform piece. And what we've seen over the past few months, it's great as mayors that we have this long-term planning and strategy and all these things that we want to get done. But our communities are calling on us to get it fixed and get it done now. So my morning began with my meeting with my cabinet with a readout regarding where we're going with criminal justice reform and how we're engaging the national company to help us with many of our policies. But I can tell you that is the challenge before us. How do we show support to our police officers and the men and women who protect us, but also not allowing our communities to feel as if we aren't listening to them and betraying them? But as my mother tells me, you only have to tell the truth one time. And what I constantly say to people is that as an African-American community specifically, we're not a monolith. So for every single community meeting that I go into and people are saying defund the police and I don't want police officers in my community and go down the list. If I walk into another room of African Americans, they'll say, I want more police officers in my communities. I think our officers need more funding. And I think for many of us, and for me especially, the discipline that I've had to use over the past few months more than anything is the discipline to stay out of the comment section on social media, because everybody's going to have an opinion, and social media seems very loud, but it's not always where the direction that we need to go in. So it's a constant balancing act, and I can't say that we perfected it in Atlanta, but I can say that we're one step closer, at least to getting there. But the past few months, this has been the toughest of my tenure as mayor. I don't know if my fellow mayors agree with that, but it's in large part because there are things before us that we've not had to deal with and had to answer these questions in the way we've been called upon to do it so publicly.
Well, I want to jump in. Go right ahead.
Listen, this topic that we're speaking to, and I've watched from about 130 miles away. Mayor Bottoms have to deal with some of the issues she's had to deal with policing in her city, and it's been alarming. When we all look at Minneapolis and what happened with George Floyd, we know all of our friends. Melvin Carter is across the bridge, and so he had an upfront view of it from St. Paul. Let me say this. Dealing with a global health pandemic by itself in isolation is one thing. You're not given a playbook on how to address it. Dealing with the economic crisis we haven't seen since the Great Recession of 2008, and I dare say probably since the late 20s, early 30s. And then you added a third crisis dealing with the civil unrest, and dealing with all three of these things at the same time. There is no one who has a playbook on how to engage all three at the same time with the intensity they all provide. What I will say with the social unrest, it really does boil down to one word, and that is trust. Trust has been eroded between the Black community and officers dating back since America's been America, where police were white officers actively participating in not only suppressing rights, but on the front line of brutality. And when we see things like George Floyd and all the other Black people, unarmed Black people that have been killed by armed white officers this year and in many years past, it continues to erode trust. And as mayors, we have to strike a balance of we're responsible for police departments, but we're also responsible to the public and our residents who have trust issues. That being the case, all of us in some form or shape or way have created public safety task forces in the wake of George Floyd's death to take a deep dive into our policies, our procedures, to take a look into how transparent we are and how better transparent we can be, to take a look into suggestions such as a civilian oversight board, which the city of Birmingham will create one, and other things, no-knock warrants, and all these other things that you want to build trust. You have to address the issues that are of equal concern, not only to the residents we serve, but for police officers to better protect the public. Let's not forget that there's some things we don't talk about. We all know we need police officers in our community, but when you have a year like 2020, I can guarantee you for all 4 of our cities, whatever our next recruiting class is, it just got smaller because the same public are the people you want to join your police academy. But if we don't have mayors on the front line addressing these issues of building trust, which is an intangible, but finding tangible ways to do it in a form of more transparency and more communication and more accountability measures and more civilian oversight, then we'll never get there.
I think that the police officers have a really tough job. I wouldn't want it not for 30 minutes. They have to make snap judgment decisions with consequences that are inconceivable. Long hours, tough jobs. When they get it wrong, they're in trouble. When they get it right, they're ignored. I really, really get that, and I understand that. But when I dig down into qualified immunity, I support the police officers. I'm behind them. I pastor them. I'm with them 100%. I admire what they do. When they go wrong, like when doctors go wrong, like when anybody goes wrong, there are a set of principles that come in to legislate that behavior. Do you think that qualified immunity deters justice for police officers, not in general, but those that have gone rogue? Or do you think that it is a necessary evil? Because when we talk about trust and we talk about the committees and all of that we put together, we've done all sorts of things together. We've had dinners together. We've played basketball together. We've sung Kumbaya. We put together puzzles. But at the end of the day, we keep ending up at the same spot again. What about qualified immunity? And where is there a point where the unions are getting involved in the criminal case of police officers and overstepping themselves? What are your thoughts?
I wanted.
Right. Go ahead, brother.
No, I wanted to see if Frank wanted to touch it, and I do have something that I wanted to add, but I wanted to see if Frank wanted to touch that.
Well, I think first and foremost, we have to be intentional in understanding that and having all tools available to address poor performers, but also rogue officers that are literally taking certain things into their hands. It has to be addressed. And so we all know that whether you have a union in your particular city or not, we have to understand, have intentionality in those kind of discussions and be very intentional with our decisions. And here in Little Rock, we've been leading the way for our state in police reform and accountability. And part of that process is you have to have a set of principles on how you engage with our officers with a spirit of respect, because we need them, but also to help them understand that we will address officers when they go rogue. And then in having that tools possible, that we understand the intentionality of qualified immunity and how that places certain things in hands that can go lopsided at times.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Any other mayor want to comment on that?
Yeah, I'll join in on that. I think, life requires balance. And so I think that the statement and the understanding of what created qualified immunity as a recovering attorney, I understand that it's intended to give freedom in the execution of their responsibilities. But at the same time, I am a supporter of democratizing power, making certain that we have the appropriate checks and balances so that we make certain that people don't take advantage of the power in which they have. And so the more that we can create opportunities for community to be a part of the discussions, to be a part of how we create a transparent process of review, it is necessary. And then, as Mayor Bottoms said, we have to understand that our communities are not monolithic. I hear the same things that she hears, that on one hand, you have one portion of the community that, is registering a proper critique of law enforcement and our systems. And on the other hand, you have people that feel safe with the more officers that they have. We have to realize that we cannot solve a problem with the same level of thinking that created it. And that it does not necessarily mean that it's an either or proposition. We can build police departments that help, execute the job of protecting citizens. At the same time, hold them accountable. At the same time, look at, how we create processes of review, whether it's a civilian review board, whether it's, community sensitivity training, whether it's task force like the one we created, which is an officer ID task force that reviews not only the abuse of force or the use of force policy, but also looks at when an officer is ID'd in the course of an officer-involved incident. So these are things that we have to look at. And one thing that I think that we fail to look at, Bishop, when we have this issue based on social justice, based on police brutality, is that we fail to look at the factors that contribute to it taking place, not just looking at the what, but the why. And I think that part of it is economic, our overdependence on a criminal justice system. And we have slowly but surely increased our investment in that regard. If you look at all of the people that are supported, we tell our children that crime doesn't pay, but crime actually pays very well. It pays the lawyers, it pays the judges, it pays the law enforcement that we have, and we have more law enforcement today than we've ever had. We have city police and county police and state police and federal police and secret police who watch the secret police, probation and parole guards. We have prison officers. We have the companies that contract with the prisons. And all of that depends on an over-incarceration of our society, which necessitates the conflict that we see within our communities. And so until we look at it from an economic standpoint and where we want to be dependent or where we want to shift our dependence, then we will continue to see these effects take place within all of our communities.
While we are battling with the whole criminal justice issue and bantering about the possibilities of how we can conceive a better tomorrow for our country, let's talk just a moment about returning citizens. I head the Texas Offenders Reentry Initiative. We've had 30,000 formerly incarcerated inmates to go through our 2-year-long program where we help them to get jobs, GEDs, and possibly a place to stay. In some cases, we've been able to expunge the records of these people who were nonviolent crimes, which were 70% of the populace over there, and to help them to infiltrate back into the mainstream community. Because if I can't get a job and I can't get an apartment, I have no choice but to go back into the criminal justice system. And we are recycling the same people over and over and over again. Here's my question. Is it possible to provide some incentive to businesses that are open, as many of them are starting to become more open, to hiring and creating a breaking through the pipeline, not to prison, but the pipeline back to prison by creating job opportunities, entry-level positions with the CEOs in your prospective cities?
We've done it in Atlanta. We banned the box from the city of Atlanta as an entity. But then we went a step further. We created the PAT-3 program, where we receive inmates who are transitioning out from their state sentences. They go into our city detention center, and it's sort of used as a halfway house. They are trained for jobs in our watershed department. And when they complete their sentences, then and we have focused primarily on men who have children, so that they can help pay their child support payments. So as they're finishing their prison sentences, they're training for a job. When their sentences are complete, they come into the city of Atlanta fully employed with full benefits. And to hear the testimonies of these men who've been through this program and how it's not only changed their lives, but changed the lives of their families has been, I mean, it is one of the most fulfilling things that you can hear. So I think that to the extent that other cities aren't doing it, it's been a great program for us. And also the opportunity to share with our corporate community what we're doing. So we've got a lot of companies across Atlanta who banned the box. And just one step further, and this is just as it relates to our Black and brown communities as a whole, pre-employment for the city of Atlanta. For some unknown reason, we were having people go through and do physicals. And I just have to give a shout out to Bishop Jakes. I was sharing with him earlier. I'm reading his book, Instinct. That's taken me far longer than it should take to read it. But it talks about the need to, you get in these habits and you do the same things over and over because it's what's always been done. Whereas we're looking to address the holes in our city budget. I just signed an executive order a couple of days ago eliminating physicals. One, because if you have people coming in with high blood pressure and diabetes, it may exclude them from a desk job. So unless it's physically necessary that they go through these physicals, we've eliminated that as well. So just another barrier that's been removed. And my brother mayors, feel free to lift that too. I'll send you all the executive order.
You continue to lead the way, Mayor Bottoms. One of the things that I definitely want to add to with Mayor Bottoms is we too have banned the box and also are focusing on our returning brothers and sisters that are reentering society by connecting them with our public works department and really focusing not only on the public works side of things, but also helping to build entrepreneurs here in our city, because that's truly the best way to help to really decrease the recidivism that we're seeing right now. But also, as our returning brothers and sisters are coming back to our cities, their cities, I might add, is that we have to be intentional about connecting them with the community, connecting them with resources. So that's one of the reasons why we've partnered with an organization called Restore Hope, where we are really creating a one-stop shop of resources. So when our brothers and sisters are exiting the system, we want to make certain that we stop them from going back, because at the end of the day, as Mayor Lumumba has already shared, crime does pay. And from a budgeting standpoint, as all of us mayors, we're looking at what we're paying as a result. Anytime that a brother or sister here in Arkansas goes to prison, that's $30,000 that we are paying. And so we have to turn that around and understand that we have so much potential in our brothers and sisters that we connect them to resources, help them become entrepreneurs, help them to find employment. So we stop that process. And it all, again, goes back to entrepreneurship and what we have to do to ensure that we decrease recidivism rates.
I'm a big fan of what you just said. I think entrepreneurship puts the American dream within the reach of returning citizens, unlike employment does. So employment is necessary for a lot of people. The reality is when nobody else will hire you, you often have to hire yourself. Connecting them with resources is very important, but I want to give a shout out to all the clergymen out there that developing programs that stand alongside of the programs that the mayors are talking about is very important. Because if they get them the job, or if they get them the check and they get them the opportunity, but they don't have the life skills to be able to assimilate back into society and work effectively, they don't have anger management, they don't know how to resolve conflicts, they have never seen a cell phone, just very, very simple life skills. They don't know how to navigate through a family that the children are grown or the wife is remarried, or so many dynamics to be worked through. And then there are mental health issues. I think this is going to take a village approach. That's why I've been meeting with CEOs and elected officials and trying to talk to develop ways that we can work on it from all perspectives, because there is a mental health component, there is a life skill issue there is an opportunity lack, a resource lack, and then childcare, transportation, all of those things become really, really strong. I don't want to take too much advantage of your time, but I do want to hit one other quick point that I think is very, very important. When you start talking about workforce housing, most of those first responders that we were talking about earlier, whether they're bringing us a pizza or they're cleaning up the hospital room or they're working in the hospital restaurant, or they're nurses or police officers or what have you, very few of them can afford to live in most of our metropolitan cities, because the cost of living is so high that you may be serving a city that you can't afford to live in. When you start thinking about affordable housing and attainable housing, workforce housing, what is your agenda? And then the second part, I'm going to lay it all out, and then you can pick the part you want to get into. President Trump made an allegation about the Democratic Party, said democratically run cities are the poorest run cities. You're seeing a peel off of a younger base, particularly of Black males, that are migrating across the line to Republican parties in a way we wouldn't thought. There was greater support for him amongst the African-American communities than what we've seen before. Were you surprised by that? How do you restore faith that the Democratic Party, that Black people are no longer a monolith? How do you fight for those votes and the loyalty and the commitment of those communities? So you can jump on either question. I just throw it out there to you. The housing and the whole image of the Democratic Party is being challenged in a way that it has not been challenged before.
Well, I think the Democratic Party can no longer. I think.
Go ahead, Frank.
Thank you so much. I think the Democratic Party can no longer take the Black community for granted. Quite frankly, the Black community is the main reason why we have a new president-elect at this point in time. And there are many concerns that have been shared and many times swept under once certain things are get into the office. And we as mayors all have given campaign promises that we have to, at our level best, die trying to complete each and every one of them. And so from that standpoint is we have to continue to instill that trust is being built, but we have to be responsive. We have to ensure that policies are truly reflecting what the people have stated that they've wanted in that process. And so I think many times politicians tend to say what they need to say to get into office. And when they get into office, they have a different agenda than the agenda that they campaigned on. And I think what we have to do is hold elected officials accountable to their campaign promises to ensure that you continue to build the base.
I think I start with a thank you to Mayor Chokwe, as well as Mayor Frank Scott, for engaging in a Black mayor's agenda that was submitted to candidate Joe Biden at the time. And then I want to thank Mayor Bottoms for actually facilitating us in Atlanta to sit with candidate Joe Biden for well over an hour and share what was important to us as mayor, most important to the Black community, related to people, I guess, walking away from one party to the next. Look, it's quite simple. President-elect Joe Biden, a large reason why he won is because of metropolitan urban core cities. When you see Detroit, when you see Milwaukee and Philly, they delivered the vote. I think the president-elect will have a keen focus on supporting urban cores where the majority of these Black men live. And if the focus is connected to the Black agenda we submitted, then issues around healthcare, issues around livable wage, issues around for their children and grandchildren of these Black men related to educational opportunities and college opportunities, then when results are actually delivered, then this won't be in question anymore. And to the first part of your question, housing, I think for all four of us, it is a laser-like focus. And it is possible that we will have an actual friend at HUD that helps us attain what we need to with federal assistance related to housing to support our frontline workers.
Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else want to jump on that?
Yeah. So in Atlanta, we announced when I was elected $1 billion affordable housing plan. And it was $500 million in private investment, $500 million in public investment. And something that Ambassador Young said to me very early on, he said, stop calling it affordable housing, which I haven't stopped doing that. But he told me to be more intentional about describing it for what it is. It's not your housing projects of old where we just put in, mass warehouse people, poor people. It's so much more than that. And when I began talking about it in terms of it being for not only our working poor, but also for our school teachers and our firefighters, et cetera, that resonated with another segment of our community that I otherwise perhaps wouldn't have gotten buy-in from. So when I'm talking with a corporate CEO of Atlanta, and he's talking about his child's second grade teacher who's having to drive an hour and a half out from the suburbs because they can't afford to live in the city of Atlanta, that gives that corporate CEO a reason to want to be a part of the solution. So we, again, just trying to be creative and thoughtful on how we address this issue. We created some displacement-free zones in Atlanta with the help of our corporate community and philanthropic community, where there's money in place to help offset rising property taxes. When we negotiated a redevelopment deal in Atlanta, something we did that was very different, we created an affordable housing trust fund to help us preserve affordable housing, but continuing just to be thoughtful on who we are as a city and who we want to be as a city. Atlanta's not a great city because it's just full of people who have money. It's a great city because it's full of people who come to Atlanta dreaming of opportunity. And one of the biggest lessons I've learned during COVID and during the social unrest is that were it not for the fact that we had an articulated agenda, there would be no agenda in our communities because we've been pulled in so many places. But because we articulated the need to try and get to this $1 billion in affordable housing, we've been able to make significant headway in spite of all of the distractions that we've been faced with over the past few months.
Yeah, I think my view is that the Black community has lived in between a vice, and on each polarity is this issue. The Democrats thought that they couldn't lose us, and the Republicans thought that they couldn't get us. When the Democrats thought that they couldn't lose us, they didn't do anything for us. When the Republicans thought that they couldn't get us, they didn't do anything for us. However, both ideologies have eroded to the point that the myth has been moved back, and the Black agenda is now standing up right in front of face of everybody saying, we want to serve those people who serve us. And I think that this is a great opportunity for the voice of the Black community to be heard, not just the anger and the wrath and the protests, but a clear agenda that's set forth in a way that we can all discuss, elected officials, spiritual leaders, as well as corporate executives, and lift the community up to the place that it really wants to go. We admire you, each and every one of you, for your service. I'm going to close in just a moment, but I cannot have Mayor Bottoms this close to me and not ask her this question. As a woman of color, to see Kamala Harris elected as the first female and first biracial woman of color into the role of vice president, how did that moment feel for you as a woman?
Oh God, I get chills when I think about it, and I've said this several times. And I'll say it again. It was such an impactful moment for me, but also the fact that my mother gets to see it and my daughter gets to see it. One, because of all that my mother ever hoped for. And then my daughter gets to grow up and have this visual and know that all things are possible and there aren't limitations. So I'm searching for words, but it's most moving and most fulfilling to see that, especially as a woman of color, that we know the value that we see within ourselves, but we often aren't celebrated and we often aren't validated. And to see this woman of color being validated in the way that she has been, being named vice president, being elected vice president-elect of the United States, is something I didn't think that I would see this soon, but I'm grateful that I get to see it and I get to share it with my mother and daughter.
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. I want each mayor to take just a moment and doing this with elected officials is much like doing it with preachers. I'm going to give you a 2-minute minimum, okay? I don't know if that's going to work or not, but we're going to try it. To encapsulate in a few sentences, a paragraph or so, what your vision is for the future for your city under your leadership. If you can encapsulate that and think about what is important to you. And while you think about that, I just want to take a moment and thank, again, the Birmingham Civil Rights Institute for creating this opportunity for this level of dialogue amongst this tremendous group of people that have been coalesced together today so that we can get to hear and strategize collectively for a more perfect union where we are included in the narrative and included in the economic empowerment and included in the housing agenda and included in every aspect of government and America and America. So Mayor Woodfin, I'm going to jump on you to go first. Give us your statement.
All right, I'll try to be as quick as possible, Bishop. My vision is quite simple. It is where our residents live, that when they walk out of their home, there is no more blight or overgrown lots, but there's single-family homes that they live next to, that their sidewalk is walkable and their child or grandchild can ride their bike on, that when they pull out of their driveway, that their street is drivable and not filled with potholes, and that the neighborhood park has adequate playground equipment and all the street lights work, that they live in proximity of healthy food, and they no longer have to drop to the ground hearing shots because we decrease crime. That is the quality of life all of our residents deserve. That's what we will continue working towards. I'll just take my last few seconds to say thank you to my fellow mayors. Thank you to you, Bishop. Thank you to BBVA for sponsoring this. And I keep seeing the script down at the bottom in support of the Birmingham Civil Rights Institute. So I would like to publicly state that I'll be making a $1,000 donation. And I hope those who are listening can support BCRI in your own way as well.
Thank you very much. Next one. I'll match you, by the way.
Well, I would say our internal why once we were elected on December 4th of 2018 remains the same. It's to unite our city, to grow it and to change it for the better. We truly believe Little Rock is positioned to be a catalyst for the New South. And the New South is evolved and is able to come to fruition through leaders that we have with us today. If you look right now in the Deep South, are all led by Black millennial leaders. And we are grateful for Mayor Keisha Bottoms. We're grateful for Mayor Woodfin and Mayor Lumumba and countless others that are all focused on an economic strategy to grow our own. And so that's what we're focused on here in Little Rock, is to unite, to grow, and to change for the better. And changing for the better means that we have to focus on transformation and leaning in to quality of life in place to secure our neighborhoods, but to understand that we have to hold all accountable so we live for a brighter day and a brighter future in our city.
Thank you very much, Mayor Scott. Mayor Lumumba.
Thank you. Once again, I'll echo the sentiments. It's been an absolute pleasure to join such a wonderful panel with good friends. We ask ourselves the question in Jackson, what do you do when you see a lack of integrity everywhere you look? You find it in yourself and you begin to change the world from where you're standing. that is why we want to initiate this new concept of what electoral politics should look like, where we democratize power, where we focus on a dignity economy, which focuses on the inherent dignity of every person, and have a new metric of what a successful economy looks like. You know, when we talk about the recent election, you know, I've had a lot of time, you know, upon the election of Donald Trump a few short years ago, where, you know, I said to people when they asked me, how did you feel after Donald Trump was elected president? I said, I felt like, you know, the Wednesday after Donald Trump was elected president, I woke up in Mississippi. And we've always been looked at as being at the bottom of most statistical categories when it comes to poverty and issues like that. And so we have realized that we are the cavalry that we've been waiting for. And so it's important that we democratize power and seek ways in how we can change things for ourselves, how we can empower people to desire self-determined lives, how we can have policy which is focused on how we provide opportunities to everyone across our city. And so I think that that is important, that we take away, that we really look at this you know, unique moment in history and understand how it brings into focus how we've been missing the mark and how much inequity exists in our world. And so I'm grateful to be a part of this conversation. I'm grateful for the exchange of ideas that we have seen and heard here and continue to go forward.
Thank you very much, Mayor Bottoms.
And thank you all, and thank you, BCRI and Mayor Woodfin. I'll join you in meeting that $1,000 donation. And I'll make it simple. I'll just read the vision statement that I created when I was elected mayor. My vision for Atlanta is one Atlanta, an affordable, resilient, and equitable Atlanta, a safe and welcoming city, a city with world-class employees, infrastructure, and services, an ethical, transparent, and fiscally responsible government, thriving neighborhoods, communities, and businesses, and residents who are equipped for success. Everything that we do, everything that we operationalize in the city of Atlanta is geared towards us achieving this one Atlanta. And in so many ways, this statement was prophetic. I had no idea how needed every single pillar of this statement would be in 2020, but I'm grateful that we were able to articulate that early on, and it remains our guiding post as to where we're trying to get to as a city.
Wow, thank you very much. You have had a great privilege. I've had a great privilege. It's been a great honor to sit up and host this tremendous event, Black Mayors Speak, to engage in conversation with some of America's best and brightest influential Black mayors, strategizing how to move the community upward and onward. I also want to challenge you to join us in supporting and really being a part of the Birmingham Civil Rights Institute on whatever level you can. You'd be surprised. Sometimes you think because you can't give on the level that several of us have committed to give on, that your giving doesn't matter. But if all of us do a little something, it will have a great impact. And many, many times we suffer for the lack of our own support, and we need your support so that this type of forum, this type of format, and the Birmingham Civil Rights Institute can continue to thrive and go forward. The information is on your screen now, how you can participate, you can text, you can sow, you can give, you can make a difference on your level. Thank you, mayors, again, for your leadership, for your vision, for your intellectualism, and for your thoughtfulness. I am Bishop T.D. Jakes. I am the senior pastor of the Potter's House, and I'm also the CEO and president of T.D. Jakes Foundation and T.D. Jakes Real Estate Ventures. Thank you for being a part of this today. Thank you for listening at us. Thank you for this discussion. And again, thank you for your participation. God bless you. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.